Good morning.
For those of you who attended last year, you probably remember David talking last year about a couple clients. One you may have heard of named Alex Rodriguez, and another, the Jonathan Martin family involved in the whole, whatever it was called, Bullygate down in Miami. David's a good friend. We actually grew up together in Washington, D.C. He was a star point guard for a rival high school. I was a fourth string point guard for the other high school. We went to law school together at Georgetown, sorry, but we did. And then we have crossed paths many times, both of us with experience on the agent side, the player side, and the management side. David, much experience at the NFL. He has become, for those of you who don't know, the go-to guy for players in trouble, for players being accused of things perhaps they didn't do, and for players seeking counsel for a variety of reasons. He is now the family advisor to Jameis Winston, Florida State, eligible for the draft in a couple weeks, and thought by many to be the #1 pick in the draft. We'll find out in 2 weeks. As the family advisor for Jameis Winston, you've been busy. Talk about your role, and talk about what you have done, what you are doing as we prepare for the draft, and how you've countered some criticism of Jameis.
First of all, I'm grateful to be here. This is more of a personal connection than professional. I started working with Jeff in 1993, I believe, and more than a client, more than a colleague, Jeff has become a friend and a mentor. And the idea that I'm sitting in front of the logo of a sports center that he created is both unbelievable but also typically Jeff, because he has achieved what he has achieved by believing in himself, but also believing in doing the right thing in the right way to make a difference. And that has influenced me throughout my career, and hopefully will until the day I stop practicing. I think about things such as touch, not just the substance of what you're saying, but how you say it. That might be hard to believe for some who've seen my quotes, but it's true. I started working with Jameis probably a year ago when the allegations by Erica Kinsman were working their way through the investigative process, and have continued to be involved with him. But, you know, the most intense period, excuse me, was probably from August to December of this past year, when the Title IX investigation and hearing process began. We were counsel to Jameis leading up to and in the actual Title IX hearing, where Judge Harding, we compelled the university to use a system different than what was in their code of conduct because of our fear of bias by university employees or representatives that would have been on the hearing panel. So we were given a selection of independent jurists, and we selected a former Florida Supreme Court justice to serve as the hearing officer, who presided over a 2-day hearing and ultimately concluded that Jameis was not responsible for the charge of having created a hostile sexual environment, which was a statutory way of referring to her allegations of rape.
And how do you respond to critics that say he was given special treatment all along? By the university, by the Tallahassee Police Department, prosecutors, state's attorneys in not pursuing anything further?
That conclusion is born out of ignorance, and it is fueled primarily by a sports media that has completely abdicated its responsibility, its journalistic responsibilities. Rachel Axon from USA Today wrote an article, I believe it was in October, that was based on nothing more than speculation spewed forth by John Clune, the then counsel to Erica Kinsman. Approximately 1 week later, I spoke to Rachel, and explained to her in painstaking detail the facts that had never been reported regarding Jameis's encounter with Ms. Kinsman and her actions thereafter. After having written a column or an article based on nothing more than speculation, Rachel told me that she would write what I told her if I could give her documentation, a double standard. My response was, when we started this conversation, you were relatively insignificant. Now you've rendered yourself completely irrelevant. We had no outlet for the facts. So let me lay some groundwork. First of all, I agree and support the policy of not mentioning an accuser's name in the media, subject to certain caveats. One, if she wants the benefit of not having her name mentioned, she cannot go on a PR campaign to vilify the accused. That's what Erica Kinsman and her team did. Two, the policy not to mention her name cannot bleed into a policy of only reporting half the story. And that's what happened in our case. The media only reported half the story. Your network, Keith Olbermann, referred to me as the worst person in sports. If more than 10 people watched his show, I would have been upset. The reason he did it is that after taking 20 months, you're supposed to complete it in fewer than 6 months. After taking 20 months to make a formal Title IX complaint, Florida State University gave us about 20 days to learn over 1,000 pages of documents to represent Jameis. At that point, I had adopted Twitter as our outlet to make our statements public, because the media simply wouldn't do it. And so I tweeted a picture of the investigative materials, the two massive notebooks of documents, and what it said on the cover was the caption of the case, in Ray Kinsman, and the media went crazy. Cornwell outs Erica Kinsman. It's just a lie. It's just a lie. It's just so wrong. Kinsman's name had been known for months at that point and reported, but it took on a life of its own. And, by the way, that's just a policy. It's not a rule. It's not a law. Why would it apply to me? The limited laws that prevent advocates from mentioning the name of an accused exist in the criminal context. Jameis wasn't going to be charged. So that law didn't apply. And then the media policy against mentioning Erica's name was a media policy. How can the media dictate to me how I'm going to represent my client? But here's the thing. I'm the worst person in sports by violating a law that doesn't apply and a policy that doesn't apply yet. Ms. Kinsman's lawyer, Patricia Carroll, called a press conference and said Jameis's name in her press conference. And that was a violation of Title IX. Zero outrage. Zero outrage. A double standard throughout the process.
Devil's advocate, forget policy, forget law. Do you feel morally that there was any problem with you mentioning her name as a person?
No. Given the facts, at that point, Patricia Carroll had demanded $7 million to settle the case. At that point, Erica Kinsman had changed her story 4 times. She lied. She lied and said that Jameis hit her on the back of her head. It's not true. It didn't happen. She lied and said that she was drugged. Not true. Forensic evidence demonstrated no drugs in her body and not sufficient alcohol to impair her memory. She claimed she couldn't remember what happened because if she had said what happened, the evidence would have been that he didn't rape her. If I had a moral problem in representing Jameis based on the facts, I wouldn't have represented him. I was interviewed by Janae Rice. I was interviewed by her father to represent Ray Rice. I had a problem representing Ray Rice because I believed Janae needed representation more than Ray did. So I didn't take the case.
How did you distinguish those? Rice, Winston.
I saw, based on my knowledge of the facts, I viewed the developments in the Jameis Winston case through the prism of innocence. When I saw the video of Ray hitting Janae, I viewed everything through the prism of a father of a daughter.
But not with Winston.
No, because the facts were clear to me that he did not rape her. And the facts, the visual evidence in the Ray Rice case were clear that if that were my daughter, I'm not sure Ray Rice would be alive right now.
Generally, you talked about the media, and admit, full disclosure, I'm part of that. Are players getting into trouble more, or is it just the oversaturation of coverage? Because we know more.
Well,
you've covered players for a long time, represented them.
I mean, theoretically, I understand the question, but as a practical matter, I can't answer it because, as Secretary Rumsfeld used to say, I don't know what I don't know. But I do believe that the proliferation of media creates a broader spotlight, and we know more now than we used to. But that's only part of the problem. The other part of the problem is the rest in peace journalism. Journalism is dead in sports media. Your network, Mark Schlabach, I believe is his name. He was designated as the insider on the Jameis Winston case by ESPN. Schlabach covered the case for 3 weeks. 3 weeks, and never called me. And it was only after I sent a text, and I believe you may have been one of the recipients, a mass text to a bunch of my colleagues or friends at ESPN, that Bob Lee responded and put me on Outside the Lines. 3 weeks he covered that case and didn't talk to the representative of the other side. That's indefensible. Rachel Axon openly told me that there was a double standard. Oh, the rest of that story. After she told me, she wrote a story based on speculation, told me she would report our facts only if I had documentation, My documentation came in the form of a 9-page letter to FSU that was reported on in the media. The morning it was reported on, Rachel Axon called my office and said the following. Keep in mind, Clune speculation, Cornwell documentation. The next communication with Rachel was, I'd like to speak to David. I've spoken to John Clune, and I'd rather not write my article based on his speculation. A double standard. Juliette McCure, New York Times, after the decision, wrote what was supposed to be an article, turned out to be a column, but it was based on ignorance. At this point, the transcript from our hearing, the transcript from the Casher hearing, the transcript from the Darby hearing, our brief and the other side's brief, 5 objective pieces of fact were available. She didn't read any of them. I objected to the public editor of the New York Times, and they wrote an article that was essentially an apology for her article. Christine Brennan, before the bowl playoff game, wrote a column and said that Jameis's conduct was even criminal, even though there was a decision not to charge. That's just not journalistically defensible. The media now expresses opinions and expresses them in a way, salacious is the objective, sensational is the objective, only to get attention.
You're painting a broad brush now.
Okay, I am painting a broad brush, but you give me the exception. There's one exception that I can think of. I can't think of the man's name now, but he wrote an article about the New York Times coverage of the Jameis Winston case. And listen, I hope every single one of you are uncomfortable about this. Every single atrocity committed against mankind is essentially a failure of the law and therefore a failure of lawyers. We are watching something in front of our very eyes that can be stopped. You remember Richard Allen Gordon, our contract teacher?
Yep. Georgetown Law.
Do you remember what he said in his final lecture?
No. Didn't do so well.
Lawyers are the trembling custodians of civilization. Sports is not just a pastime anymore. Sports is one of the most significant industries in our country and in the world. Jeff's contribution here gives us an opportunity to take an academic look at this industry and figure out where we need to make a difference. I am telling you, we need to make a difference in the way that journalists cover sports. It's changed. This is the first time that we have seen the vilification of an athlete drop into the amateur ranks at this level. I could go on for the rest of the day telling you things that you don't know. Do you know this woman never made an outcry? Why don't you know that? If this case was worth covering, why isn't it a known fact that she didn't call 911, she didn't call a family member, she didn't call the police, she didn't text a family member, she didn't text an official of FSU. Her first communication after her alleged rape was a text to a friend to ask, where is my ID? A few hours later, she had another text to another friend asking for the answers on a test that she was taking the next day. If this case was worth writing about, why didn't they cover that?
You will admit he's done some knucklehead things. The crab legs, the shouting vulgarities in the lunchroom or whatever that was. And obviously, I'm sure he's gone under the hot white lights of all these NFL teams with the interrogation process. What is your ongoing role getting ready for the draft, answering these questions? trying to brush it off as immaturity or whatever the defense is? What's your ongoing role with the Winston family?
I doubt that Jameis is the first NCAA athlete to get a free meal. And I doubt that he is the first NCAA athlete to demonstrate that he's immature and a knucklehead. Jameis is ready to be an NFL quarterback on the field, but he is not ready to be an NFL player off the field. I spoke to Mike Mayock a couple weeks ago, and Mike said, "Oh, this just strikes me as so immature." And my response is, why is that news? Why is that news? One thing we have to do is pull back the veil and admit the truth. With the growth of sports as an industry in America, we have gotten to the point where there is an inverse relationship between athletic skills and life skills. Because as soon as we see someone has some prowess, even at the youth level, we tend to focus on their athletic development and apologize for their development as people. Consequently, by definition, if they are good enough to play in the pros, then it is likely, again a generalization, but it is likely that the delta between athletic skills and life skills is the greatest among these individuals. So, Jameis asked to meet with the commissioner. We walked into the league office, whatever floor it is now, 6th floor, 9th floor, and they have every single ring from every single
Super Bowl.
Super Bowl. And Jameis walked right up to them, and he filmed them on his iPhone, and Deb came out and got us and took us into the commissioner's office. And in the commissioner's office, off in the right corner, is a replica of the Lombardi Trophy. And Jameis walked right up to that and said, "I'm gonna get one of these." And the commissioner turned around and said, "I'd prefer if you got one of those," and pointed to the Walter Payton Man of the Year trophy, and walked Jameis over to the trophy and talked to him about what it meant to win the Man of the Year trophy, being elected by your peers for making a difference. We spent the day at the league office meeting with various people, from PR to marketing to Lisa Friel, who is the investigator for domestic violence, Troy Vincent, the executive VP of football operations, put everything together for us. And our last meeting was back into the commissioner's office with Greg Gensky and Kenny Felder, the agents, Jameis, Greg Aiello from public relations, Jeff Pash, the number 2 guy in the league, the general counsel, the commissioner. And we sat in a circle and we talked. And everybody talked about what's coming up. And I said to Jameis that, you now know what this institution is about, right? If FSU made let's just give them $100 million, right? The NFL is going to make $13 billion. You now know what this institution is about. You also know what the resources are. And he, no doubt, it's going to happen. Somebody in his locker room is going to tell him, "Oh man, don't pay attention to the player engagement representative on the Bucks, and that guy's a spy." And the union rep is going to talk about how Rodgers the bad guy and everything. And I told him, listen, if you decide not to avail yourself of these resources, you better have an option. You better have an option, because this league will spit you out, will chew you up and spit you out and keep going. So our role is to make sure that first he knows what his resources are, and second, that he avails himself of them. You know, beyond the canned PR responses and things like that, there is a man, a young man, who's developing into a grown man. There is a son of Antonor and Loretta, right? He's not just a football player, he's a man who plays football, and he is being asked to feed the families, right, of people of this organization with his athletic talent. And in return, we have to assist him in developing and growing as a person, becoming a man in this fishbowl. And it's not going to be easy.
Who initiated the NFL meeting?
Jameis.
Why?
In November, I had an opportunity to spend a day with him and talk to him about what sausage looks like when it's being made. And that it was a new day. The analogy that I use, and I don't know that Procter & Gamble has a brand of toilet paper, but that whoever makes toilet paper, when you're standing at the assembly line and the perfectly round rolls of toilet paper are coming down the conveyor belt, and the quality control person sees an oval roll, they don't stop the conveyor belt and have a meeting about this oval roll and try to get it to be round. They reach and they throw it over their shoulder and discard it as waste. And I told him, you're coming in with the expectation of being oval. I can sit here and complain and tell you the other side of the story about how this case has been covered and how he's been treated unfairly, not special. But the fact is, if he messes up again, he's done. And the person who will determine that he's done is the commissioner. And so we talked about it, and he said, I want to meet him. In some ways, he's very immature. In other ways, he's got maturity and some things that are just off the charts. And one of them is he has an incredible sense of, this will sound odd, but he has this incredible sense of self-awareness and self-responsibility. He's willing to take on the responsibility in a way that is authentic. So he said, I want to meet him. So I called up and said, he wants to come. And, it wasn't, sure. We had to talk about it and what the objectives were. But, people don't realize, I worked with the commissioner in the league office, and we have been friends for years. So sometimes I slip up publicly and call him Roger. But people don't realize that Roger's natural connection in sports is to the players. And every player that I have been involved with Roger, post-discipline, they have great relationships. He has an incredible relationship with Dante Stallworth, right? So I don't think that it was a huge reach for the commissioner to meet with him. But look, he looked him in the eye. Troy looked him in the eye and said, look, the easy answer if you mess up is get rid of you. And that's what we do. We're good at getting rid of players, right? And this thing will keep going, right?
Yeah, I've been there.
Yeah.
Does he go number one? Book it?
Book it.
Ladies and gentlemen, David Cornwell. Thank you.